Children of the Sunflower. Part 2. Pink or Green. Haruto was well on his way along Route 29 to Cherrygrove City. The sun continued to shine on his adventures as he battled wild Pokemon with his Chikorita and made a failed attempt to catch a Pidgey. After getting into a clearing out of the tall grass, he decided to take a break underneath the shade of a tree. The sun was getting high and the temperature was climbing with it. Taking a sandwich out of his bag, he took a bite and then leaned against the trunk of the tree. He couldn't have asked for a better day to begin his journey. Once the sandwich was half eaten, Haruto felt he had rested long enough and climbed back to his feet. He looked to the west, which is the direction he had been heading, and he found it was nearly impassable with trees growing so close together and thorny bushes growing thickly around them. Instead, he was going to have to follow a more maintained path that twisted back and forth up a steep hill to get to where he wanted to go. Just as he was about to leave, there was a loud crack and a sort of echoing rumble afterward. It sounded like thunder. Despite the fact that he had already been enjoying the sunny day, he looked up, expecting to find dark clouds gathering, but it was still just as clear as before. Confused, Haruto looked around the clearing to see if he could find what had caused the noise. Leaves on the trees rustled and the tall blades of grass waved. There was the man he had passed by just outside the borders of Newbark, and he could see someone with their Pokemon near the top of the hill. Everything seemed as peaceful as when he had been sitting by the tree. There was no evidence that anything significant had happened at all. Haruto shrugged his shoulders and made for the hill. At the top of the hill, there was a path to the north. Thinking it might be quicker to get to Mr. Pokemon's place that way, Haruto headed onto the new route. It didn't take long to find he had made a mistake. What greeted him wasn't so much a route, but an enclosed field surrounded by trees and a cliff. The boy shook his head, annoyed at his decision, and started to head back. But then, something darted by somewhere in the trees. Haruto turned to get a better look, but couldn't see anything out of the ordinary.
Hello?
There was no response. Nothing moved, and nothing made a sound. Haruto stood completely still, staring into the darkness of the trees where he believed he had seen whatever it was. As he stood there, still and silent, he started to get an uneasy feeling. It felt like something was watching him.
Is anyone there?
After a few minutes of continued silence, Haruto slowly took one step closer toward the trees to try and get a better look. Then he took another. It was when he made his third step that something in the trees twitched. It was hard to discern what it was as it moved quickly and seemed to blend in with the leaves around it. What Haruto could tell was that whatever was in there, it wasn't human. Excited about trying to catch another Pokemon, Haruto released his Chikorita. Together they headed off in the same direction the creature had gone. Hanako was struggling her way through Route 29 to reach Cherrygrove City. Lightning and thunder continued to battle in the sky, and the rain made battling Pokemon challenging. After getting out into a clearing, Hanako was soaked from the rain-drenched tall grass. It had been a struggle just to get that far, but with the storm still raging, she didn't feel like she could take a break. She would have loved to take shelter under a tree, but the lightning was a concern in that regard. Still, she needed some food, so she opened her bag just long enough to snatch out an apple. Taking a bite out of the apple, Hanako looked around to see where to go next. Cherrygrove was located at the west end of the route, but that way was blocked by trees and thick overgrowth. Instead, she was going to have to follow a more maintained path that twisted back and forth up a steep hill if she planned to reach her destination. As she got ready to start the climb, there was a sudden burst of light. It wasn't lightning, but a ray of sunlight shining down onto the peak. The girl could still hear the rumbling thunder and the rain hammering atop her umbrella, and when she looked up, there was no sign of the sun. When she looked back to the hill, the light had gone. Confused, Hanako looked back up at the sky to see if there was any signs that the storm would break. But the wind picked up and thunder boomed even louder than before. Lightning branched across the sky, and in a flash, the girl could see there was another traveler atop the hill. In fact, she was pretty sure that it was where the beam of light had shone. She thought that maybe it had just been a Pokemon using a move up there that had created the light. Shrugging her shoulders, Hanako started up the hill. At the top of the hill, there was a path to the north. Hanako considered that there might be a shortcut to Mr. Pokemon's home that direction, and considered giving it a shot. Before she could, something caught her attention out of the corner of her eye. She looked over and saw that a woman was hurrying off toward the west, followed by a pink Pokemon. The girl tilted her head, wondering what the hurry was. Her guess was that whoever the woman was, she had been the one hanging out atop the hill. That most likely meant she wasn't just trying to get out of the rain.
Hey!
The woman and her Pokemon did not respond. They continued running and began to vanish behind the curtain of rain cascading down. Hanako's curiosity was piqued, and she ran after the woman. It was rough going on the slick grass, and Hanako almost slipped right down the hill. Unfortunately, it meant she lost sight of the woman and her Pokemon completely.
Where did she go?
Hanako slowed down to a walk and tried to see through the rain into the surrounding trees for any sign of the woman. It was next to impossible to distinguish anything with the constant movement of rain under the dark sky. The best Hanako could do was continue along the path toward Cherrygrove. As she drew nearer, the girl began to feel uneasy, as if she were being watched. She clutched tightly to the Pokeball that housed Cyndaquil as she stepped into the city. Chikorita sensed something up ahead and alerted Haruto. The boy stopped and looked carefully all around to see if he could find something out of place, knowing that what he was looking for blended in with the foliage. Glancing down at his Pokemon, Haruto saw it, discreetly lifting some vines and point to a spot on his left. The boy turned his head as slowly as possible to look. At first, he didn't see anything, but then the creature blinked a large blue eye. Not wanting to waste his chance, Haruto issued a command to his Pokemon.
Chikorita, tackle!
Immediately, the boy's partner Pokemon rushed off toward the mysterious creature. It leapt into the air and nearly made contact when another voice rang out from high above.
Confusion!
Chikorita was suddenly flying back toward Haruto as power was released from the camouflage Pokemon. Haruto caught his partner and was knocked onto his back from the momentum. From there, he could see the Pokemon he had been chasing fly out from the trees and up the tall cliff out of reach.
What Pokemon is that?
The boy wondered to himself. It stopped flying when it reached a woman who was standing at the edge of the cliff. She rested her forehead against the Pokemon and gave it a gentle pat with her hand. Then she turned to look down at Haruto.
Stop trying to follow me. In fact, it would be best if you forgot you ever even saw me or this Pokemon.
What? Why? What is it?
The woman placed her hand on her hips.
Really? I'm not going to tell you when I just told you to forget.
I would forget easier if you didn't make it so mysterious.
Rubbing the bridge of her nose, she looked back to the Pokemon beside her.
Epoch. Confusion.
The green Pokemon moved closer to the edge and stared down at Haruto. Suddenly, he felt himself lift off the ground, spin around both sideways and end over end. Finally, Haruto was tossed backward where he landed hard on the ground and skidded to a halt right next to the entrance to that route. Attempting to climb to his feet, Haruto nearly tipped over, disoriented from the event. He stayed down on his knees instead and shook his head to try and clear it and regain equilibrium. By the time he looked back toward the cliff, he could tell that the woman and her Pokemon were gone. On the ground, Haruto's Chikorita was racing toward him. He gave the little grass Pokemon a hug and pat.
Are you okay?
The Chikorita didn't answer but twirled around and bounced onto Haruto again to indicate it was fine.
That was intense. I wish I knew what that Pokemon was and what that woman was up to.
The Chikorita stared off at the cliff at the end of the route as if it too were pondering the same things as Haruto.
Well, I don't think we're gonna get any answers just sitting here. Besides, Alan gave us a job to do.
Haruto got to his feet and was mostly steady. Chikorita watched him, unsure if he would fall again.
Shall we?
Chikorita stared off toward Route 29, and Haruto took that as a yes from the Pokemon. As they neared the borders of Cherrygrove City, Haruto and his Chikorita were confronted by a wild Sentret. The boy looked down at his partner and said,
All right, third time's the charm. Go, Chikorita!
Once inside the borders of Cherrygrove City, Hanako made straight for the Pokemon Center to finally get some relief from the rain. She was soaking wet, even with the use of her umbrella, and couldn't wait to dry off. Folding her umbrella, Hanako sloshed her way over to the counter and handed over her Pokeball with Cyndaquil inside. She didn't need to say anything as the nurse understood immediately what to do, leaving Hanako to get a room. Soon, Hanako was showered, in bed, and her clothes were set out to dry. She hoped that by morning she would be well rested and ready to go, and, if she was lucky, maybe the storm would finally be over. It wasn't over, at least not completely. When Hanako arrived back at the Pokemon Center desk and collected Cyndaquil, she could see that it was brighter outside than it had been the day before. There were still some distant rumbles in the sky, and rain was still falling steadily, just not as heavy. However, when she stepped outside and popped up her umbrella, she didn't hear any rain pattering against it. She tilted the umbrella back to get a good look at the sky and found it nearly cloudless and lightening up with still rising sun.
Weird,
she thought out loud. And then suddenly rain was falling on her face again, and the once clear sky was once again covered in clouds. The world was tinted a pale green.
Just great.
Despite the continued rain, it felt warmer than it did the day before, and Hanako was grateful for that small blessing. As she headed toward the northern exit of Cherrygrove, she stopped a passerby to make sure she was on the right track.
Mr. Pokemon lives up on Route 30, right?
Yeah, that's right. He's a little off the beaten path, though. You'll want to stick to the east.
Okay. Thank you.
Not a problem, miss.
More confident on where she was headed, Hanako left town and intended to follow the instructions she had just been given. But as soon as she stepped into the tall grass, a Pokemon leapt from its hiding place inside and launched itself at the girl. Hanako ducked and then quickly tossed out Cyndaquil's Pokeball.
Go, Cyndaquil! Tackle!
The fire Pokemon emerged and obeyed instantly. It launched itself at the flying creature that had startled Hanako and knocked the red and black thing out of the air. Balling up its fists, the bug Pokemon rose up and started swinging at Cyndaquil, landing one blow against the fire Pokemon's middle.
Tackle it again, Cyndaquil!
Racing around the tall grass, Hanako's partner hugged the wall of a short cliff. It ducked another blow from the red and black bug Pokemon, causing the thing to hurt itself by punching the rocky cliff. Then Cyndaquil took the opportunity to land that second tackle.
Alright, keep an eye on it, Cyndaquil, in case this doesn't work.
Hanako tossed a Pokeball toward the bug and it was instantly zapped inside. The ball shook once, twice, and then clicked into place. Hanako had caught her first Pokemon.
Way to go, Cyndaquil!
The fire Pokemon seemed pleased with itself, but soon it looked up at the rain a little disgruntled. Hanako raised Cyndaquil's Pokeball and called him back inside.
There you go. Safe and warm again.
Not long after the surprise ladybug attack, Hanako found that the path she was on had a handful of other Pokemon trainers battling one another. She was grateful they were distracted in that way so that she wouldn't be bothered. She only had the two Pokemon, and they were both a little tired after the battle they just had with one another. Unfortunately, they were hogging up the path that led farther north. While trying to figure out how best to get around them, Hanako noticed something else about the path. It was headed west and then north. But the man had said she needed to stick to the east side of the route. The girl turned around to see if there was another way she could go, and, sure enough, there was a grove of trees that would be easy enough to navigate.
I guess he did say it was off the beaten path.
Hanako made her way through and found herself battling a Pidgey along the way. It put up a tough fight, and when she was getting ready to catch it, the Pokemon flew away. She threw up her arms frustrated.
Well, at least I didn't waste a Pokeball on it.
It didn't take much longer after that to reach a clearing with a small house nestled back by some trees. A sign at the front of the building read, Mr. Pokemon.
I guess this is the place.
Reaching the door, Hanako was about to knock when something pink caught the corner of her eye. At first, she thought she had just caught a sight of her own hair, but then she spotted whatever it was hiding behind a tree a little deeper in the woods.
It's okay. I won't hurt you.
The Pokemon remained where it was, and Hanako thought about her words and how she had recently just battled a Pidgey and a Ladybug. If the pink Pokemon hiding in the trees had seen any of that, there was no way it would believe that she would not hurt it.
Wait. Aren't you the Pokemon that was with that lady?
The door to Mr. Pokemon's house opened, and Mr. Pokemon himself stood in the doorway.
Welcome. You must be Haruto.
Hanako looked at the man for a moment, surprised by his sudden appearance. But then she turned to find pink Pokemon again. It was gone. Mr. Pokemon peered around the doorframe and looked off into the woods to see what Hanako was looking at.
What's out there, miss?
Huh? Oh, nothing. I just thought I saw... Wait. Who did you say I am?
Mr. Pokemon's head snapped back to look at Hanako, and he frowned as he tried to process what she had been about to say and what she had just asked.
Sorry, what was that?
Did you just call me something? I mean, were you expecting someone else?
Shaking his head, Mr. Pokemon stepped to one side to allow Hanako in.
No, just you, I believe. Professor Elm said he was sending a new trainer my way. I assume that must be you. Hanako, right?
Hanako frowned as well, very confused by what was going on and having trouble focusing due to her mind being preoccupied by the Pokemon she had seen in the woods.
No, I mean, yeah. Yes, I am Hanako, and the professor wanted me to pick something up.
Once Hanako was inside, Mr. Pokemon shut the door and made his way across the room.
Excellent, I'll grab it right now.
Without stopping, he called back to Hanako and asked,
You did bring an incubator, yes?
If that's what this is.
Hanako said, holding up the glass container Professor Elm had handed her. Mr. Pokemon peeked over his shoulder to see what she was holding.
Yep, that would be it.
Turning back, he pulled something out of a box that had some cushions inside. It was a very large oval-like object with an odd pattern across its surface.
And here is the egg.
Chikorita was sitting on top of the centret when Haruto finally threw the Pokeball. It struck the centret, and there looked like there was an expression of relief on its face when it vanished inside, finally free of Chikorita. The poor thing didn't even try to break out of its ball.
We did it, Chikorita.
In his excitement, Haruto hadn't noticed that his partner had wandered into some trees and was playing around in the foliage. Apparently the victory was not that important to the grass Pokemon, and it just wanted to play.
Enjoying yourself?
Chikorita looked up at Haruto, and it seemed as if she smiled.
I think I found a good name for you.
Haruto stated.
Foliage.
The Chikorita leapt and spun, seemingly pleased by the name.
All right, now come on, Fol. We need to get going.
After another spin, the grass Pokemon rushed forward to walk along with Haruto as they entered Cherrygrove City. But, at the border where they were going to enter, someone stood in their way. She was a girl about Haruto's age, and she had pink hair. Her green eyes narrowed, and she pointed at the boy's Chikorita.
It was you! You stole the professor's other Pokemon.
To be continued.